short quotes, 4 to 5 words maximum. Okay, and that really is maximum. You've just shown me from the examples you gave me a moment ago, it could just be one word. Okay, keep them short. You need to be able to say 2 or more things about it, because if we don't choose those quotes we can really talk about, or that evidence we can really talk about, you will not get to that analysis part, the interpretation part, which is our next focus. Okay, we're going to look at that next. Now, this next one's really, really important. You're looking for interesting examples to explore. Again, link it back to what we've just looked at. Now, when I say examples, remember, evidence and examples. I know I'm talking a lot about English because that's obviously, you know, my specialism, and I'm your English focus coach. However, it's a way in to think about how you can link these techniques to other subjects. So think about examples as, yes, it's a quotation from a text, from a literary text. It's you know, a specific reference from a literary text, but you can also apply this to, like I've said, sort of historical reports, investigations, geographical investigations, okay, where you're looking at things like, you know, key events in history, or key events in, you know, climate change or deforestation, whatever the topic is you're looking at in your geography. Could be human geography as well, and looking at people and places. But also it could be a number. It doesn't have to be words. Okay, so it could be a fact or statistic. So evidence, examples is anything that you have in front of you that you need to talk about. And this one really, you know, is really applicable across the board. Finding patterns or linkages between different examples. Okay, hopefully you can see how that clearly applies to any subject. So think back to what we've just looked at, picking out all those verbs and linking them together. Move around your text, move around your example. Again, if you're looking at some sort of historical report, you know, and you're looking at maybe cause and effect, thinking about, you know, well, what's happened earlier on here and how does that relate to what I'm being told later in my source text. So working around the text. And that comes back to my Lego analogy, that you're not looking at it as that finished bookshop, as that finished article or piece of you know, stimulus text. You are breaking it apart and getting back to those little building blocks. Okay. And then this is a really important one, and we're going to look at an example in a moment that highlights this. It has to be relevant. Don't think, well, I know descriptive language uses personification, and there's an example here, but I can't, you know, it doesn't really link to the question, but I'm going to use it because it's a technique I know. It has to link back to that topic. And that's why last week's bootcamp was the first session, because you have to understand the topic and the focus before you can achieve any of these next steps. So let's have a look at how we can select the best points for our essays, because if we don't do that, we can't achieve this. We have to select the best points, the best checklist we've got there to be able to clearly answer the question at those highest levels. If our evidence is weak, if our examples are weak, we will never get to those highest levels of criteria. Let's have a look at this example. Just a yes or no in the chat box. And if you can tell me your reason for saying yes or no, and how can you tell, does this student, or did this student, find the best evidence for the question we have just looked at? Okay, and interestingly, she chose evidence that no one else chose. So that's quite interesting. So William's saying yes. Great. Okay. I think so. Okay. So we had conviction, and now I'm not too sure now. None of us chose it and we know what we're doing. So did she choose the right evidence? So yes or no in the chat box. Has she chosen the best evidence? And also think about what she's done with that, because actually, in order to be able to tell whether it's the best evidence, you need to read what she's actually said about that evidence, because that helps you decide whether it's the best or not. So Samantha's saying no, so 50-50 at the moment, guys. So Ellie and Daniel, if you want to have a go at yes or no. I would say there's not a right or wrong answer, but actually there is for this one. The pressure is too much. I'm having to type too quickly. There is this is an intensive boot camp, Daniel. We've got a couple of no's there, and a yes. And Daniel's going to say no as well. Brilliant, Daniel. Pressure wasn't too much in the end. Okay, so let's have a look at it. Let's get the examiner, my input. So, no. Okay, no. Now, on the surface, and with an untrained eye, this does seem like she's got some good evidence. Okay, because we've got a technique and we've got a good example there. A bit long, her whole example, but the mightiest mountain is, you know, that's alliteration. So at the moment, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, she's got a good example. But now let's see what she does with it. Does she explore the effect of the example? And more importantly, actually, is it relevant to the question? So what she says is, it shows that the storm was brutal. Well, we know the storm was brutal, but I'm not sure the mightiest mountain disappeared shows the storm was brutal. Maybe overpowering, maybe, you know, covering it, but nothing about violence in that, I don't think. If something disappears, it's actually quite passive, isn't it? Because Mount Everest is enormous. Okay. But is that in the text? That's just, we know that Mount Everest is a huge mountain, yet still was out of control compared to the violent storm. Was the question about Mount Everest? Or was the question about the storm and words to describe the storm? So actually, the example she's chosen, although on the surface it looks like a good example, it doesn't really allow her to explore the effect of the storm. And that was the question. Now, if she was really, really clever, she probably could get around it, because she could look at the use of the mightiest and you know, the idea that in a battle with the storm, that would lose. But it's touching on the surface, but there's no analysis there. So I would say that is not a good example, because it doesn't allow her to do what we just did with the examples you guys chose. Okay. The other thing is a bit of a sort of a warning, really. Alliteration is quite hard to explain, because you need to look at the sound. So you need to look at the m sound. So mightiest mountain, the m, it's quite a m actually in those examples, isn't it? And to be honest, to me, that's not a brutal sound. And again, you're talking about the violence of the storm. So you'd have to link that alliteration to what it suggests about the violence of the storm. So this was an exam situation. I think she's setting herself up to not be able to achieve those high levels because she hasn't chosen the best example.